It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric is out this morning. He has no voice. Just found out about a half hour ago, so I have not talked to him. All I know is that he said hopefully he'll be back on Sunday night, but he woke up with zero voice. And I guess, Alan, you did talk to him, and Alan said that he sounded terrible, so we hope he is okay. The funniest thing is I flash back like 3 years ago. I got the text from him, but I've not talked to him. But he said, I have no voice. I checked. I don't have COVID. I'm like, wow, I'm flashing back now. So how's everybody doing, huh? Doing good? Here we are, the 6th of December. And man, there's just so much news out there. Coming up on the show today, the Department of Government Efficiency, well, in the Senate they meet and starting to see what the problem is going to be. So you're saying you're going to have to cut. Well, we are all for the hypothetical of cutting. My district? I don't know about that. Cut everywhere else. But that's going to be a hard thing to do. And so we'll get to that coming up because, you know, when you talk about, they have Elon Musk did go from, we can cut $2 trillion a year to $500 billion. So they have reduced their expectations because that's one thing they'll be criticized on. They said they were going to, reduce it by $2 trillion, and they didn't get there. And now he says they see $500 billion is the number, even though the $2 trillion has come up in news stories. And that the left is going to be pounding on that. The left is not going to want to cut. Expect everything that we have. Expect what we went through in the 90s and expect what happened back in 2012. And it was really 2011, 2012, where, and I know I'm going to bring up the name and you're going to say, we don't want to hear about him, but it's true. Paul Ryan is the guy who came up with the plan to basically balance the budget in 30 years. It was 30 years, 32 years, 33 years. That's a long time to balance the budget. And I remember when that happened, Eric and I said, well, that if you're going to project it out that long, odds are it's never going to happen. But they never got to that point because Democrats went crazy. I remember the ad of Paul Ryan pushing an old person over the cliff in a wheelchair. And that was all based on the fact that he said, we need to balance the budget in 30 years. Now, any of us, if we looked and said, okay, I'm in debt right now and I wish to get out of it in 30 years. I wish to balance my own budget. None of us would look at that and think that that is a radical plan at all. In fact, most of us would probably say, that's too long. You're procrastinating. You need to get it done sooner. And so understand where the left is on this particular point. I remember. I am old enough to remember. Oh, now I'm sounding like probably Eric is right now. I'm old enough to remember back in the mid-'90s when the Republicans just wished to reduce the rate of growth, not cut back, but reduce the rate of growth of the school lunch program, which was a school lunch program, then it became a school breakfast program, then it became food after school program, then it became food during the summer program, then it became midnight snacks. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit on that, the midnight snacks. Why? Because the kids should be in bed. But for the kids that are not in bed. Okay, that would be why you'd have the midnight snack, right? Because you're making an assumption that all kids are in bed by midnight, and some aren't, so we should feed them there too. But, that's you've seen the massive expansion in it. And I remember back then in the school lunch program, It doesn't matter whether you're a rich school or a poor school. You get the money. And Republicans looked at that and said, we got to get control under it. And I remember that there was a poll taken at Republicans, and this is when I knew. This is when I slowly realized that the Republican Party was not going to get the job done, because they polled Republicans, and there were a lot of programs out there, but the Republicans looked at the school lunch program. This was a poll on Republicans, and the vast majority of Republicans thought that the school lunch program was a wonderful thing for the federal government to be involved in. Now, you may sit there and say, but I think it is. I think it's a very efficient thing to take money, from the tax dollars from the person, run it through the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., and then ship it back to the states and the localities in order to do that. But the point is, if you believe the federal government that it's their role, this is going back to the mid-'90s when this was a big issue, if you believe their role is to do that, then what isn't their role? What isn't the responsibility of the federal government? And so at that point, I realized, I said, I don't know if we're ever going to cut, because people love their own programs. They love the programs that they get. And I don't know if the American public is really serious on cutting. They have never been yet. They say they are, but then when it comes to, okay, well, if we're going to cut, let's go back to the $2 trillion. If we've got a budget of roughly $6.5 trillion and you cut $2 trillion, something of yours is going to be cut. Democrats will take advantage of that. I saw yesterday one senator say that the biggest problem are the people in this room when it comes to cutting. Well, yeah, of course, because it'll be their jobs that will go. And so are the people really, really serious? Doesn't matter whether conservatives are. It doesn't matter whether Elon Musk is. It doesn't matter whether Ramaswamy is or even Trump is. It is are the American people ready to cut? And then you say, where are you going to cut? And they say waste and inefficiency. It's like, okay, yeah, we always hear that. Let's see you produce that. And there is waste and inefficiency that they can cut. Does it add up to $2 trillion or $500 billion? I doubt it. Now, I want to see the cuts. We have to have it. You cannot. One of the things that came out of the meeting yesterday was this debt is the debt and the interest on the debt is unsustainable. We can't do it. We all know it. You can't do it. It's going to blow up. But remember, for most of the campaign, well, spending came up, and what you hear is what you always hear. Well, we need to get rid of the foreign aid, and we need to get rid of foreign aid. We need to get rid of waste and inefficiency, and that's going to balance the budget. That's been the talk for a few years now. Well, it's not going to. You're going to have to actually cut programs. The reason the budget is out of control is because people believe that the federal government, the voter believes that the federal government, the voter over the last half century in this country believe that the federal government should be involved in every little stinking aspect of our lives. And when they are, it means they're going to spend money to do it. Now, I'm all for it. You're going to hear mocking from the left. I saw some mocking yesterday from leftist media. They're not going to, come on, they can't cut anything. I did see, what was the, did I save it here from the, was a Democrat. Here it is. Congressman Robert Garcia. You can put me down as a member of Congress who has no intention of working with billionaires and fake federal departments to dismantle our government and our institutions. We need to fight now more than ever. That's what you're going to hear from Democrats over and over again. You're going to hear they want to kill old people and they want to starve children. That's what you're going to hear over and over and over again. So there's a lot of optimism. But can they actually do it? It is a tough road. It's the right road. They have to go down that road. I'm just trying to temper expectations. You're not going to see this problem solved. And that is because the people who can solve the problem, they believe their jobs depend on spending and getting a ton of money for their districts. It's always been that way, and it will continue to be that way. I think Eric and I believe that the problem will not be solved until you come to a fiscal crisis. Now, the Republicans can sit there and say, look, we tried to do it. We really tried to do it, and the Democrats just won't do it. But if the Democrats or the political party that is against cutting spending is rewarded in elections by the voter, then you're not going to get there. It's that simple. But they're doing the right thing. It's a tough thing, but they're doing the right thing. And I hope it works out. I hope if they could cut, I always think about the plan that what was the plan just free spending. Just don't spend any more. And you actually start cutting. Because of inflation, you actually start cutting. Or remember there was the cut 1% a year for 10 years. And people say that's not much. Haven't been able to do that. We haven't been able to do really anything in cutting the budget at all. And so now you're saying, okay, we need to cut a third, what the original was, almost a third, and that we can do it. A lot of optimists out there, and I'm happy to see the optimism out there. And we'll see whether it gets done, whether it gets done or not. And I wish them all the luck in the world in doing it. So we will get to that. Oh, the first poll is out on Biden's pardon of Hunter, and I wonder why. You started seeing just a little bit on social media yesterday of saying, well, maybe it's not a good idea for Democrats or for Biden to do, an across the board, a preemptive pardon on crimes crimes where people have not been convicted of them, crimes of people that have been charged with them, because when you look at it right here as to what Biden did, landslide numbers against the pardon of Hunter. And so I think Democrats are coming out and saying, not only does it give, for example, Trump the ability to pardon, for example, the J6ers, whatever, but it's the fact that you're not giving pardons to American citizens that, for example, Trump may believe have been exploited by the law. And by the way, many have. As we know, with some of the court rulings already, they were way overcharged. This is about the citizens. What Biden is doing about is everybody that was involved in the weaponization of government. And by giving the pardon when there is no crime nobody's been convicted of a crime, and nobody's been charged with the crime, by doing it, the Democrats are now afraid that you're giving the impression to the American public that the entire Biden administration was crooked. So they're between a rock and a hard place now. And then there's this thing, he should pardon Trump and that will solve the problem. No, it won't. So like I said, we'll get to that and more. The numbers are interesting in the polling out there. Also, some of the numbers out there on California increasing the minimum wage to $20 an hour and what it has done to restaurant employment. And you look at the country as a whole and what they've done, then you compare it to California, and it's like, there it is. When you increase the cost of doing business, no matter how you do it, it always has some type of an effect. So we'll get to that and more coming up, plus your great phone calls, too. We got a great show ahead, 866-90-RED-EYE.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Electrical systems are one of the most common causes of winter breakdowns. So when your batteries talk, it's important you listen. Keep an eye out for the warning signs that may indicate your electrical system needs attention to help avoid getting stuck out in the cold this winter. The most obvious sign that a battery-related issue is present is if your truck has trouble cranking at the proper speed. If you experience any sluggishness when starting your engine, get a full electrical system check from a trusted service provider.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric is out this morning. He has no voice. So hopefully he gets well over the weekend, and we see him back on Sunday night, Monday morning. The first poll is out on Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter. The voters in this country, the people in this country, reject it. The latest poll, the Napolitan News Service, came out with it on Thursday. 62% oppose the pardon. 30% of these are registered voters. 62% of registered voters oppose the pardon. 30% of registered voters agree with it, and the rest would be 8%. I don't know. So I really think that poll, and probably the internal polling that they've taken on this, is why now you have some Democrats wondering, okay, if he does this blanket pardon for everybody, where do we start? Because if you do it, the fear now is, well, then it's obvious that what you're doing is you're protecting all the corruption. And as we had stated yesterday, that it's really interesting because the excuse coming from Democrats is we have to pardon these people to keep Trump from doing what we did to him. That's the irony of it. That we weaponized the government against Trump, and so we need to blanket pardon everybody in our administration so Trump doesn't do what we did to him. When it comes down to it, that's what it's about. But the problem for Democrats is if they do the blanket pardon, and I really wonder, we talked about this yesterday, if they pardon Liz Cheney, how Democrats would think about that. What? And just for the heck of it, throw Dick Cheney in there too. We're going to give a pardon to Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney too. That would drive Democrats up a wall. Because they found out that wasn't really too popular, Harris focusing so much time on the endorsement of Liz and Dick Cheney. They finally realized, as all Republicans told them beforehand, that talking about that they got the endorsement of the Cheneys really didn't rally people behind them. They did everything wrong in this last election. They really did. I think instead of the Democrats talking about what did we do wrong in the last election, they need to start discussing what did we do right in the election. That would be a much shorter list. But yeah, that's the fear now. Well, then we give the impression that all Democrats are corrupt. Well, when you look at what the Biden administration did, a ton of the Biden administration was corrupt. They weaponized the government, not only against Trump, but they weaponized the government against people who disagreed with them. We'll get to that and more coming up. 866-90 Red Eye.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has a morning off because he is under the weather. Well, I guess, I don't know if he's under the weather, if he feels sick, but he just has no voice. So we'll see what happens there. Reading here from the Wall Street Journal, what Biden's lawfare has wrought. Having abused the rule of law, he would abuse the pardon power if he issues more preemptive pardons. Now that Biden has granted his son Hunter one of the broadest federal pardons in history, Democrats are debating whether Mr. Biden should hand out similar preemptive clemency like Christmas stocking stuffers. If Mr. Biden goes along, it will be another broken Democratic norm and another swirl into the lawfare spiral. The pardon that Mr. Biden signed Sunday forgives Hunter for every federal crime he might have committed over a decade, not for specific crimes. Democrats are fearful of payback when Donald Trump retakes power on January 20th, and Mr. Biden wants to shield Hunter from further investigation. If Mr. Biden is willing to do this for his son, the argument goes, how much more deserving of protection is Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney, and other liberal Democrats? The preemptive pardons for outgoing officials would be a bad precedent, a constitutional abuse, and the next lawfare escalation, as if the country has not had enough of those. And, you know, one of the things you talk about, that by doing this, that in itself is basically lawfare or the weaponization of government, because you've set the precedent down that we can have a corrupt administration. We can do things that are corrupt, and just at the end, at any point, the president of that corrupt institution can simply pardon everybody involved in it for any federal crime that they've committed. And so I think that if you see it for Hunter and what the polling says, you would see the same thing if there was an across-the-board pardon for people in his administration. What you're doing is, to a significant portion of the American public, as you can see from the polling on the Hunter pardon, is what you're saying is, okay, breaking the law is okay. Because it's not about, and this is the difference here, it's not about, you know, they talked about Kushner's. You know, well, Trump did it to Kushner. But he was convicted of specific crimes, and he paid the penalty for it. This, with Hunter Biden, nobody is saying, except for Biden, nobody is saying that his son didn't commit these crimes. Nobody is saying, we all know, that the FBI and the Department of Justice attempted to slide this through where Hunter would not be accountable. One of the reasons I think that you see the landslide numbers of people being against the Hunter Biden pardon is because it's gun crimes and it's tax evasion crimes. Americans don't like it when the elite get away with not just not paying their taxes, but tax evasion. Because you go to jail for tax evasion. Ask Wesley Snipes, the actor. He went to jail for tax evasion. And so what you're setting up is that we claim, because you see so many Democrats talking about this, we'll have more coming up here in just a second. But the claim is nobody is above the law. Now everybody knows that the Democrats were lying to you about it. Everybody knows that Biden was lying to you about it. Everyone knows Pelosi was lying to you about it when they were talking about Trump. And so it went beyond the specific crime also that Americans want punishment for gun crimes. Americans want punishment for tax evasion crimes. But it goes beyond that because it's a blanket. And everybody knows the corruption. Everyone knows. There's two things I've always said that Americans hate. And so far, they still hate them. One is tax evasion, and the other is influence peddling. Both apply to Biden's. Both got approval from Democrats. Democrats were okay with it. Democrats are okay with Biden making millions for his family through influence peddling from foreign adversaries. They're fine with it. They've got no problem with that at all. That's the message that you're sending. And the other message that you're sending is, in a Democrat administration from now on, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can weaponize the government, and at the end of the day, nobody's going to pay for it because you have the ability to pardon anyone for any possible crimes before they're even ever charged or convicted of a crime. And that's what stinks. Let's go. I'm going to go to here. This was, I believe, CNN last night. Never Trumper, Jonah Goldberg, talking about it on CNN about the pardon.
Jonah, what do you think of this idea of preemptive pardons for, let's just say Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, people who served on this select committee investigating January 6th, that Donald Trump clearly hates them and would love to see bad things happen to them. What do you think?
I think it's a horrendous idea. I think it is a terrible moral hazard question to preempt it for a president. If this is the path we're going down, I think we should talk about repealing the pardon power entirely, or creating some new body that handles pardons, because this is not what the founders intended. I think it's the Anti-Federalists had basically got it right. All in favor of creating a massive legal defense fund, right, so that these people don't get bankrupted by abuse of power. But I don't think the courts have been corrupted. I think these cases would get thrown out of the courts. You just don't want to create a situation where the process is the punishment. But I just think it's a terrible precedent.
And Americans agree on that. This is not what the pardon power. The pardon power was not put in to enable illegal activity or corruption in the government. It was put in as a safeguard for those that went through the justice system, that the president and or others, because people petition for the pardon, they go to the White, this person should be pardoned because the justice system didn't work for them for specific crimes. That's why it exists. It doesn't exist for what the Democrats now are talking about using it for. It wasn't meant the way he used it for Hunter Biden. And certainly it wasn't used in order to send the message, because that is what you'd be doing. You'd be sending the message that from now on, if Democrats are in power, they can do whatever the hell they want. Now, don't commit a state crime, but any federal crime that you wish to commit, go ahead and do it, because at the end of the day, we can be corrupt. We can weaponize the government, because if you look at what they're talking about, everything they're talking about is exactly what they did to Trump. Well, it's not just the fact, maybe they'd be found not guilty from the courts, but the whole thing would be to bankrupt them and destroy their lives. Exactly what they did to Trump. And so it's like, we want to keep this going. We want to keep this going where we can go after our political enemies. We can be a banana republic. That's what it's doing. It's actually justifying, the Democrats are justifying the United States becoming a banana republic. Now, already doing it with Hunter, but as you see out there, you've got Democrats all over the place. Now, I think yesterday was the day, and it might have been because they've done the internal polling and seen, oh, my God, Americans don't agree with Hunter Biden. And if they just come out and just go, well, any crimes that anybody had committed in the Biden administration, all these people, okay, you'll never be brought to court. You can't be found you can't be found, you can't be charged, no court will take this, then what you're doing is you're saying the weaponization of government under Democrats is going to be okay because the president, a Democrat president, will just say, nope, I'm going to pardon you. Because that's the irony of all of this. The Democrats are saying, we need this blanket pardon so Trump doesn't do to us what we did to him. And that's reprehensible. So we'll see what happens in it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. And the question came up yesterday, would it be so bad that you have some of these people that say, no, we're not going to accept the pardon? And the whole thing is, I disagree with that. I think it was the Wall Street Journal said, well, a good thing would be to stop all of this is if Biden pardoned Trump. No. Because if you pardon him, then you imply that Trump is guilty of something. So I wouldn't take the pardon. And I don't believe Trump needs to take the pardon anyway because of what the Supreme Court decisions have said. But I don't think that solves the problem at all. Because then you send the message to everybody, even those that hate Trump, that anyone in Washington, D.C. now, anyone gets a blanket pardon because they're part of the elite. The exact message you don't want to send. But for Trump, it would also send the message, if he accepted it, that, okay, he took the pardon because he was guilty. And so Trump wouldn't want that. So there you go. I look at this and I just say, on top of everything else, and we'll get to this here coming up in a little bit, because now that we're going to be moving on here after, the Christmas vacation comes up, and then we move into the Trump administration. But when you look at everything that the Democrats are trying to figure out, what did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? Why didn't we do anything right? This would just pile on top of everything that the Democrats did wrong, another huge albatross. Because right now on the issues, man, we got some of the transgender stuff because of the Supreme Court. My God, I mean, these people are just they're pervertedly insane. And so you get to all those major issues where they know they're wrong. They know they're wrong in all the major issues. That's why Harris tried to co-opt what Trump believes. They all know they're wrong. But they can't change it. 866-90-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. There's a great audio cut we got coming up, and this is from a professor in Michigan, college professor in Michigan. That and it's great because it mirrors what we've been saying for the longest time. And his point is, yes, systemic racism does exist in the United States, and you can find it right in DEI. It's something that we have said. It's something that we have said since the summer of 2020, when you had Black Lives Matter and the left out there saying that systemic racism exists, in police departments all over the country, and systemic racism has been institutionalized. And we went, they're right, except they got it wrong. It exists, but it exists mainly, the vast majority, in the identity politics, which is all part of the DEI, all part of critical race theory of the Democratic Party. The people that have mainstreamed racism in this country and institutionalized it is Democrats. They got it wrong. They're saying that, well, the institutions of like the police departments and companies and everything. That's where the racism exists. It's not where it exists. It exists for the most part, and it is promoted as mainstream Democrat thought. So we'll get to that and more coming up here this morning. Plus, interesting for Pete Hegseth yesterday, if you went on X, it was like you saw a lot of stories saying he's got the votes, he's got the votes, he's got the votes. And you go elsewhere, it's like he doesn't have the votes, he doesn't have the votes, he doesn't have the votes. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. Plus, if you want to get in, your calls and comments too, 866-90 Red Eye.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. Welcome and good morning. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has no voice, so he's not here this morning. So it's you and me here. Welcome to a Friday, December 6th. Wow, tomorrow, anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Yeah, I saw it again. It was on the documentary, The 24 Hours After Pearl Harbor. One of the most interesting things that came out of that was Roosevelt on that day had a sinus infection. And you know how they treated the sinus infection back then? Cocaine. Yep, it reduced the swelling. It was the common practice. So in order for Roosevelt to get through the day, now nobody knows because the medical records aren't around anymore what amount he had, but on that day they, had the swab and they were putting, cocaine up his nose in order to relieve the sinus infection. By the way, that has to be terrible. You ever have a sinus infection? Man, I had one once. Oh, man. Oh, probably, I remember 93. And they took care of it, but, I went to the doctor and, I got the antibiotics and it was gone after a few days. But, I mean, that's a weird thing to have. And I didn't know that, if a real bad sinus infection can kill you. But, yeah, that's how they treated it. That's how they treated it back then, was actually with cocaine. And I remember the first time I saw that, I went, what? That day when he's trying to make a decision on what to do and what the information was? Really? But they admitted they didn't know how much he actually, had and whether it affected him in, any type of negative way. Nobody knows. But, yeah. December 7th, 1941. Wow. All right. You ready? I'll probably be playing just a ton of the audio cuts that we have from this week that we didn't get a chance to play. One of the things that you have seen over the last month is Democrats trying to figure out what they did wrong. Gavin Newsome was asked the question yesterday. Now, the best thing is he wouldn't give an answer. Let me play the audio cut, and then I'll tell you what you see in the video. Because his point is, well, everybody has differing opinions, but they actually don't because of on the podium, the sign he has on the podium clearly states what the problem for the Democrats in November was. But here's Newsom when he was asked that question yesterday.
Do it, brother.
I want to talk to what happened a month ago today. What went wrong? How did Democrats get shown the door so badly? What would you have done differently than perhaps Ms. Harris or Mr. Walsh did not do?
I appreciate it, and I hope you can appreciate if I appear a little political, it's because I'm intentionally trying to be by not answering your question. And what I mean by that is I'm with Jon Stewart, who wisely said, be patient. What happened will be revealed. And it won't be revealed in the hours and days and weeks and even months after an election. That will absorb a deeper understanding over time. And that's the approach I'm taking. I wrote out, I'm not making this up, there's about 6 pages I have in notes. They're at my mother and dad's grave in the car of everybody's punditry that completely contradicts everyone else's punditry about what happened. And I did that purposely for my own absorption and edification, that it will reveal itself.
But he knows what the problem is. You know why? He knows what the problem was in the last election. Because he's at a podium, and they've got that sticker attached right to the podium that says, more jobs, lower cost, stronger border. He's like, I have no idea. I can't tell you what it is. What could it be? I'm going to have to go with a comedian. Yes, I'm going to go with what a comedian says. We're soon going to find out. Well, no, you've got the sign right there. Lower cost, stronger border. You're trying to co-opt Trump now. And so what we're doing is we're going back to the Democrats saying, what we need to do is take your taxpayer dollars, and your taxpayer dollars will go to invest in programs where the government is the arbiter of what you wish to buy. And we're going to tell you what to buy, and then we're going to subsidize that product, and we're going to call it investment by taking, just like electric vehicles, and just like alternative energy. We're going to take your taxpayer dollars to produce products that the public is not asking for, that cost a lot more, which is why we have to take your taxpayer dollars to subsidize it so it doesn't have to compete in the competitive marketplace, and still these companies will still all go bankrupt producing this product. That's what Democrats are trying to sell you. And they say, well, it's very important that we have investments in the private sector. No, it isn't. Stop it. They're still trying to sell the same thing, but they know what the problem is because he's got it right there on the sign in front of him. Lower cost, stronger border. Now, he is back, I will say. I'm looking at him. He does have... His hair was dry a couple of weeks ago, and it was a little bit longer. And now he's back to his late 1980s Pat Riley, L.A. Lakers coach, hairstyle. All slicked back. We talked about the other day about, George Clooney furious at Obama and everything else. And I said, George Clooney has that. Some people have that look. They've got that look where you look and go, oh, they're pretty sophisticated. They look like they're pretty intelligent. And then you hear them open their mouth and you're like, they're clueless. That's what Newsom is. That's why Democrats first jumped to Newsom. They went home. Wow, okay, he's got the look that we want. Yeah, he's got that look. He looks younger. He looks like a business person. What does he have to say? And what is the results of the state that he governs? And so it was about a year ago where Newsom's name was being talked about all the time because they had nobody else. And then they did the polling. And he polled worse than Harris. Can you imagine? You talk about an ego buster. Can you imagine? You're a Democrat and you're like, oh, God, I'm polling lower than she is. I'm polling lower than Two-Face. By the way, when I say Two-Face, that comes from the Seinfeld episode, and that is all about the video that she put out a little bit over a week ago where the lighting was horrible. And if you've ever seen the Two-Faced episode, it's where Jerry dates this woman who, if the light is proper, is very attractive. And then, by the way, I don't know how they did that, but that was an amazing episode because you go, oh, she's relatively attractive, and then the different light, and he looks at her, and you go like, yikes. But that's what she looked like. She looked like Harris in that video looked like the Two-Face character with bad lighting. And so what happened is Jerry would only go see her. They would only go to the coffee shop because the lighting was proper there and she looked great. But that's all they could do. He wouldn't go anywhere else. And then she, got upset at him because, well, can't we go someplace else besides this? No, I love the coffee shop because the lighting was proper. But could you imagine? Could you imagine what an ego buster that was? Now, part of the problem was a year ago, 13 months ago, when Newsom did the debate with DeSantis and got smoked big time. People realized, oh, he's a human shell who doesn't have a critical thinking brain. And that's the truth. And yesterday, there's an opportunity. He's sitting there right on the podium, lower cost, stronger border. What do you think the problem was in the election? Well, we're going to find out. Nobody really knows. There's contradictory things. And I'm going to go with what a comedian says. God. We're really dealing with children, They're not going to change because stubborn children are going to stick with it no matter what. And like I said, they know what the problem is. Right there. Newsom's promising lower cost and a stronger border. So Trumpism. It's just, oh, gosh. Does anybody even, I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see where the Democratic Party goes over the next 5 years, where they go over the next couple of years. Where do they go on everything? As you see over the last month, they lost. And we all know what they have to do. Everybody knows what they have to do. And they won't do it. Harris tried it. Nobody bought it. Because Democrats are about identity politics, and Democrats are about more government control of your life. It's that simple. The identity politics is the racism, the anti-Semitism, the bigotry of critical race theory, of DEI, the misogyny of the radical transgender movement that they're all doubling down on now. I got some audio coming up here. It's just a 9-year-old knows what they want. Shut up! A 9-year-old knows what they want. And that came from one of the CNN anchors. I mean, these people are certifiably nuts. And therefore, the government deciding what products you want. And you can't debate this with me. No Democrat can debate it because we know what it is. We saw it with electric vehicles to the point of complete and total absurdity. Okay, let's produce something that Americans don't want that is not as efficient. And that's the problem. You look at the productivity of a gasoline vehicle and compare it to the productivity and efficiency of an electric vehicle, it's not even close. And has been brought up many times. It is the first time ever that a government has promoted a product that is and subsidized a product that is less efficient than what's currently on the marketplace. Well, that kind of stuff's nuts. And then with the grid, we talk about the grid. Remember, when Biden ran, they eventually had to add nuclear because there was like, you're idiots. Stop promoting that we can run the grid on solar and wind. We can't do it. You got to add something else. And so, like I said, you're dealing with, it's like an elementary school science project where you're like, oh, that's really cute, except you've missed all this other stuff that's, based on the science and economics. But you're too young to understand that. Remember when Biden was saying we're going to run the entire grid on solar and wind, and then after he became president, they said, add nuclear. You got to add massive nuclear input because you can't do it with solar and wind. And as we know, all these grid reliability organizations, because of what we have done, have said we're not going to have enough electricity. Think about that. Think about a country and the politicians that you put in office. Okay, not you and not me. That others put in office, that their plan, their goal was to set the United States up for economic, energy, and national security suicide. That's what they've done. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Most owner-operators leased to larger carriers are paid on a per-mile basis or a percentage of revenue per load. The per-mile basis is most prevalent among larger fleets. Percentage at smaller. Pay per mile tends to dominate discussions about pay just because it's easier to measure, and pay per mile often is wrongly used as the deciding factor in leasing to a carrier. While pay per mile can be a vital factor, it's not a cure for every ill, nor does it mean a big settlement check is coming an owner-operator's way. Why? Because pay per mile always must be considered in balance with gross revenue as well as total costs. Gross revenue can include flat mileage pay that varies by length of haul, percentage revenue pay, and more. Most importantly, though, for every revenue dollar generated, only part of that dollar is profit. But for every extra dollar of cost saved, the entire dollar contributes to profit. Knowing and understanding your cost to operate is fundamental to understanding the true value of any pay package. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Rhino Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off because he has no voice at all. I did get a couple of emails saying, Gary, what do you think about Trump doing the interview with NBC and Kristen Welker? And they were pretty frustrated, saying the point of the listener was, why does he want to go on a liberal network? Why is he doing this? And we have stated this before, that he shouldn't do it in the past. This one, we'll see how he does. I don't see a reason for it, but I don't necessarily believe that it's going to be bad, because I think what we found out in this election is the people back him on the things that he believes. Now, the problem was Kristen Welker isn't going to ask questions of where she knows Trump's strengths are, which is the issues. It's going to be the minutia of everything else. But he's not running for election again. So it sort of changes that, but I have no idea. If you're trying to push your agenda, there's much more friendly media to go on and put those interviews on social media. So I don't know. Maybe he wishes to go on there because it's like, okay, they lost. They can't win against me, but we'll see how the interview is. But it's not as drastic at all. I'm not as all concerned with it as I would have been pre-election, when it was like, don't do any enemy interviews anymore. Let your surrogates do it. Let J.D. Vance do it. They're much better at doing it. And he even basically admitted it. But him going on here, yeah, it's all going to be on, probably the majority of the questions will be on Hegseth, I would assume. They're not going to talk about his strong points. And, for example, I hope that she brings up and says it's terrible what you're going to do on the border, because she's going to lose that argument. But would that be the first major interview that I would do? No. But am I even close to being as worried about it this time as I was where it was, back in the election. I said, stop. We said this in the middle of summer. Stop doing interviews. Stop doing interviews with any enemy media. Let J.D. Vance do it. And that's exactly what they did. The surrogates were the ones that sold the Trump agenda and the commercials. But when you went to enemy territory, it would always be, it was Ramaswamy, it was J.D. Vance. At times it was Elon Musk. And we thought that was, that was really, really good. And he made sure people knew, yeah, J.D. Vance can go anywhere and talk, and J.D. Vance can. Speaking of J.D. Vance, I heard he said something the other day, but he's been quite quiet, hasn't he?
On our website, RedEyeRadioShow.com. Show info with stations, podcasts, and more. Red Eye Radio.
And I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off because he doesn't have a voice. Hopefully it returns by Sunday night, Monday morning's show. Hey, download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. This was said, I saw this on X yesterday, and this was said a little bit differently than how we've explained it, but it's still, it makes the point so clear about the Hunter Biden pardon. You want your head to explode? Trump was impeached for trying to investigate all the crimes that Joe Biden just pardoned Hunter over. Let's do that again. Trump was impeached for trying to investigate all the crimes that Joe Biden just pardoned Hunter over. Eric and I have said for years, with the impeachment, the first impeachment, and then everything that we have learned since, and then with the pardon, when you look at it, and we said long ago that when we talked about the first impeachment, how bogus it was, because as we knew at that time, the Obama State Department was totally concerned that the vice president was in charge of Ukraine and Hunter was sitting on the board of Burisma. They knew it. They were extremely worried about the conflict of interest and what was going on there. And now we know so much more. And Eric and I have always said, did they impeach Trump for that because he was getting too close to the corruption? Well, the pardon by Biden, going back to when he joined Burisma, just made the point. He made the point. So I just thought the way that was written was just absolutely beautiful. Trump was impeached for trying to investigate all the crimes that Joe Biden just pardoned Hunter over. Tell me where that's wrong, Democrats. You can't. You know it. That's why he did it. He went back to the beginning of 2014 because that's when Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma. And he wants to make sure that they don't go after Hunter for any possible crimes and dig into the influence peddling between Hunter, Burisma, Ukraine, and the influence peddling to Joe Biden. So I just thought it was interesting how to bring that one up. All right. The Senate committee for the Department of Government Efficiency met yesterday. Rand Paul a part of it. And he was asked the question on Fox News yesterday whether this is more show or they're serious. And he was asked whether they could cut $1 trillion. So is that the new figure now? Because now I didn't hear the $1 trillion figure. I knew there was a $2 trillion figure. Then it was $500 billion. And Fox asking the question that trillion. Here's his response.
There's definitely serious on the part of the public, and where Vivek and Elon Musk bring power is by drawing attention to this. I think they'll also be able to do things by executive action within the administration, like no longer hiring people, having a hiring freeze, having people work in person. I know that sounds really harsh, but making people show up for their jobs. All those things can be done by executive action. Repealing regulations can be done by executive action. Repealing regulations can come by rewriting regulations and having us vote to repeal the new regulations as well. There's all kinds of good things that can happen. On the spending front, there's a way that the executive branch can do something called rescission. So if we send $1 billion over there to build a ship and the government builds it for $800 million, they have $200 million left over, they could do what's called rescission, send it back to Congress. It gets a simple vote, a simple majority, a privileged vote, and if all the Republicans will stick together, we can cut hundreds of billions of dollars of spending. Can we get to $2 trillion?
Yeah.
That may be optimistic, but I'm all for getting there because that actually equals the deficit. Our deficit each year is $2 trillion.
Absolutely. And there is clearly that much that is wasted in government programs. They never go backwards. They only get bigger budgets every single year. They never have to go to the same standard that the rest of us do to find places to carve out savings. I want to play this from Joe Scarborough today, because this is the mentality that you're going to hear, I think, from a lot of members who are very reliant on the spending, the lobbyists, the pharmaceutical companies, the people who give them a lot of money for their campaigns. Watch this.
The United States government has already spent 80% of its budget on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, vets, defense, and interest on the debt. This is a scam unless they're going to slash Social Security and Medicare and and Veterans Affairs. They're never going to get to $2 trillion.
Can't be done. Can't be done, Senator. What do you say?
Oh, poor Joe Scarborough. I remember when he was a conservative. You know, when he was a conservative Republican, he actually voted against expanding Medicare into Medicare Part D, this extra part to make Medicare bigger because he thought it might bankrupt the country. Yep. So there was a time when he actually was a thoughtful person, but no longer. Now, there is a sliver of a truth in the sense that, yes, entitlements are a lot of the spending, but to say entitlements are a lot of the spending, therefore we're not going to look at waste, is the excuse we hear all the time. Oh, we're not going to look at this spending because if you get rid of all waste, it won't balance the budget. Well, why don't we start by getting rid of the $750,000 that was spent feeding cocaine to Japanese quail to see if they were more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. Maybe Joe would agree with getting at least that, get rid of that.
Unbelievable.
Well, it's going to be tough still to cut, $2 trillion. I hope, look, I'm the first one that hopes they get there because we've been railing on where spending and the debt has gotten us, to the point of even probably 2 years ago, we had our callers going, look, the debt isn't bad, the debt isn't bad, the debt isn't bad. It looks like at least what you got here, and I think Rand Paul's right, and we've said the same thing, you need to market it to the American people to let them know what the problem is, and you have to market it all the time. Now, the American people always say the debt is a problem, we need to do something about it, and so you've got two problems. Does America really want, can you find $2 trillion in waste? And can you cut that through Congress? We haven't been able to do it at all. We haven't been able to cut at all. That's the reality of it. Right now, we have a 1-vote margin. That's it. In the House. That's it. Some things, as he said, rescission, for example, you can do on a majority. And that would be great to do that. And I'm all for targeting the waste and inefficiency in government. Does it reach $2 trillion? Because the Trump administration is not going to cut the defense budget. They're not going to cut Medicare. They're not going to cut Medicaid. Rand Paul understands that. And if that is 80% of the budget, it is tough to cut a third of the budget. But let's do it. It doesn't mean you don't do it. The only problem I see here is if you oversell it and don't get there, it can be used against you in the next election. But if you actually do cut if you do get rid of waste, a lot of the waste, not all, the reason why it's so tough is no matter what you do today, when you're dealing with a monopoly, it's so tough to get it done. In the competitive marketplace, you have to cut in order to compete. That's why we don't like where the federal government is being involved in every little stinking aspect of our lives. The first thing is, if you want to hit the waste, you get rid of all the subsidies for electric vehicles. You can do that if you're talking about cutting spending, not rescission, and not where is the waste, and then you can look at it and say, okay, if people aren't going to come back to work, because this is a very legit question, but it's so tough to get rid of in a monopoly. That's the problem. People talk about, well, you hate monopolies, we hate monopolies. Well, the biggest monopoly is the federal government. How many, we saw what Elon Musk did with Twitter. What did he get rid of? 90%? 90%, I think it was. 80, 90% of the employees. And it's still operating. And I didn't see a business model. There still may not be the business model to justify what he paid for it. But there definitely is a business model now where X is the place where people go for news. No, it's not going to be blue sky we'll get to that coming up in a little bit. Democrats are so afraid to debate. They're so afraid to debate on the issues. And so they need, what blue sky has become? It's their safe place. We need a safe place where we can promote our insane ideology and everybody will agree with us. Well, the fact is, you're going to do that, and all what's going to happen is that the right's going to come, and that's what's happened already, and they don't like that. Well, we need to take the opposition away. Blue sky needs to be the safe space. It's not going to do anything. It may be comforting to them. It's not going to change the narrative. Because other social media where the debate's going on X and in podcasts and in talk radio, that's what really has come to the forefront, over the last couple of years, and the legacy media is hurting. Nobody believes what they say. But yeah, I hope they can do it. But even if they don't get there, if they're able to cut and really cut waste and inefficiency, where it doesn't affect, where you're not cutting the programs that Americans love, because that'll get you out of office. Because Americans say we want to cut, but they don't want their own programs cut. I hope I'm wrong on that someday, but we have not seen it up to right now. We have not seen that. But if they can cut, if they could cut $50 billion of waste and inefficiency, I'd be happy. I'd say absolute success, and it would help them. If Democrats came out and said, they didn't cut the $2 trillion, that's because you kept us from doing it, but we cut $50 billion, and we plan on cutting $100 billion next year, and we've got the votes for it, that's all you need to do. And the American public will say, okay, they're cutting the waste and inefficiency. So I wish them great luck in doing it. And man, I'm telling you, I hope that I'm wrong. I'm hope that we have read the American public right up to this point here on Red Eye. I hope we're wrong on reading the American public from now, to whatever, how long it takes to cut the budget. I hope I'm wrong. And that the American public truly understands the problem with the deficit and is willing to do what's necessary to balance it for economic sanity and economic survival in the future. I hope they are. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Rhino Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric is out. He has no voice apparently. Coming up here, following the top of the hour, the insanity of the radical transgender movement. You know, until Democrats reject that, they've lost all credibility. You know, they really have. If they're going to continue to say that a man can be a woman because a man says so, if they're going to continue with their absolute misogyny of trying to destroy women's sports, as I've always said, that's an indicator, because I've said this to so many people. Democrats believe that a man can be a woman if the man says so. That taints every other opinion that they hold, because when you hold such a delusional opinion, then I have to question anything else that you believe, because it's so insane. Yet they keep pounding on it, and we'll get to that coming up here in a little bit. Plus, the interesting thing of when you raise costs, the $20 minimum wage in California, how has it affected fast food restaurants? Statistics are in on it, and really, really interesting when you look at the growth of that sector in the rest of the country and how it's the opposite in California. Price matters. If you raise the cost of doing business, it's always going to have a number of effects. Prices are raised, hiring goes down. That's the reality of it. It can be one or the other, or a combination of both. Normally, it's a combination of both. So we'll get to that here in just a little bit. Plus, this one I love. Los Angeles Times owner plans to launch tech-driven bias media in articles next year. I do want to get to the story that was out yesterday. NBC praising journalists fleeing to Blue Sky and off of the toxic X and Twitter. All that coming up.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA, I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has a morning off because he has no voice. So it's you and me. Well, for the second day in a row, we said it the other day for Hegseth, when Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, when you had Lindsey Graham came out and said, well, I'm not going to let any anonymous story change my mind of whether I'd vote for him or not. And then Trump came out yesterday with basically an endorsement that he's staying behind him, which means they must believe that they're having success in getting more votes. I still think it's an uphill battle because of the way the media will cover it over this period of time. But yesterday was interesting because we were analyzing it. We've stated from the very beginning. In fact, one of the things with Hegseth that I liked, and I don't know about all the different allegations. I don't know. They're all sourced. And we saw what happened with Kavanaugh. And so he denies it all. But for me, when he said the military needs to be lethal and based on meritocracy, he had me there. That's the only considerations that you should have for the military. That's my way of thinking. But when we analyze things, of course, people tune in and they misinterpret it, or I don't know. As we said before, it's really interesting that the vast majority of criticism we get on the show are things we've never said, or people not understanding the point that we made. Now, we had one person yesterday, one listener, call us Rhino Scum for analyzing it, and we said, no, we're conservative scum. Want to make that very, very clear. We're scum, but we're a different kind of, we're conservative scum. We're called scum because we push the conservative movement and have for the longest time. But if I were a Republican, and Eric and I have said this over the longest period of time, I really left the Republican Party back in 2006, 2007. It was around the time where I realized they were not. It was mostly for fiscal reasons. And even though here in the state of Texas, I vote in the Republican primary every time, I don't have a party at the moment. The Republican Party looking better for me. We'll see. But, I vote, like I said, in the Republican primary. You can choose, one or the other, and that's what I do. And the reason was, you could look back at it. Eric, we were just together a month. So it goes back to, I think it's early August of 2005 when Eric and I first started working together. Yes, next year is our 20th anniversary. And you had Tom DeLay from Texas come out and say, Republicans need to stop. Republicans need to shut up. Conservatives need to shut up, basically, because we've cut everything in the budget. And the conservative movement was just furious at the Republicans for spending. And Eric thought I was going to die from a stroke that night because I was so, angry at Tom DeLay for saying it. And if, the reputation of Tom DeLay was he was the ultimate conservative, from Texas. And, we were just furious. But I will say this, because we've answered this before, because we've been called, if we disagree with Trump in the past, which of course we have on some things. I agree with Trump more than I do the average Republican president, but we disagree with him. We've been called Rhino before. And I will say this, if Eric and I, because Eric is also, a libertarian independent as I am, but if we were Republican, you're absolutely right. We would be rhinos. Absolutely. But not for the reason you think. Not because we're more liberal, but we're more conservative than where the Republican Party has been over the last 20 years, and in some cases where they're going now. Not in all cases, because in some cases I think they're doing, in more cases than not, I think they're going in the right direction. But yeah, just to make that clear, we are not Rhino scum, we're conservative scum, but if we were registered Republicans, we would be rhinos because the Republican Party is still too liberal for us. Just so you know. Just to clarify that. And a lot of that has come from, most of that have come from their, not as bad as Democrats, but still their support for irresponsible spending. So I just want people to know that when we talk about, the goal here, and it's like, okay, I hope they can reach it. It's a tall thing for them. It's not that we don't want it, because we've been promoting. If you've listened to this show, I don't know any show that has been promoting the problem with the debt, where we have fought with Republicans on that over the last 20 years. And like I said, until really the COVID spending, we would have Republicans call us and say, you guys are making too much. Debt is a natural part, and you guys are way overblowing the problem with it. Well, now that we have $1 trillion of interest on the debt, nobody's saying that to us anymore. So that's the point I wanted to make. I wish them all the success in the world to cut a ton of stuff. Because I believe that the federal government is involved in way too much of our daily lives. And they are involved in things that the founding fathers never wanted them to be involved in. And I think if you're going to have the spending and you're going to have the federal government put us in this fiscal situation, the right thing is that a lot of those responsibilities should go to the state, which is why, the Department of Education. By the way, I did see that Randy Weinberger from the Teachers Union, she goes, the Department of Education, I'm paraphrasing here, they basically get in our way to unionize more or whatever, but she wasn't, because she would have no problem if the Department of Education went away. But there's this process that there's this narrative that exists out there that if the Department of Education on the federal level goes, that education will go to hell in this country. And that's not true at all. In fact, they put more impediments to learning. Remember, It is the federal government under Democrats that have done everything possible to stop school choice, to keep competition out of education. They want a monopoly on everything. Americans, many Americans, hate monopolies unless it's the federal government. And the problem with the monopoly, whether you grow too big in the private sector, and you see, companies have been monopolies, you have seen over periods of time, whoa, watch what happens to them. They end up having, fiscal problems because of competition that comes in that can do it more efficiently, more productive, and cheaper. So monopolies many times self-implode on themselves. Why? They grow too big. I mean, look at X, for example. Look at Twitter beforehand. They had so many dang employees that weren't necessary for the operation of it. I said Musk cut, 80, 90%? And now they fear him. Now, did he do that strictly as a business decision? No, he has admitted it wasn't just a business decision. It was about freedom. It was about freedom of the press. It was a First Amendment thing for him. He knew he was going to lose money. But does he have a business model now? Yeah. Certainly he does. But I think it's just important that people, know, because we have a lot of new listeners, and if you're a new listener, you may not know where we stand. And so after we were Eric and I were called Rhino Scum yesterday, we decided to tell that gentleman the way that it is here on the show. We're scum, but we're conservative scum. So the best part is, and it doesn't happen often because I think people know now that, our skin is pretty thick. It does whatever. But I just love it how we live in an age where people just think that I'm going to get him now. I'll name call. It's like, ooh, whoa, you're calling me a name. Oh no, what shall I do? But that's all cool. But excuse me, but Elon Musk, as I've said, I think Elon Musk, and we said this a while back, you could actually look at him, I think history will look at him as a savior of the First Amendment in the United States. We talk about, let me get the story here, because NBC praises journalists fleeing to leftist echo chamber, Blue Sky, from toxic X and Twitter. NBC News is reporting a shift in social media, claiming that journalists flock to Blue Sky as X becomes increasingly toxic. It is no surprise that, this is from Breitbart, that corporate media would find itself at home in the leftist echo chamber that Blue Sky has become since the election. Journalists are finding more readers and less hate on Blue Sky than the platform that we used to know as Twitter, said NBC, wrote in an article published on Saturday. Blue Sky has become a leftist echo chamber social media platform that has enjoyed growth since the election. In the article, NBC reported that when the Ashton Pittman, the award-winning news editor and reporter, first joined the app Blue Sky, he was the only Mississippi journalist he knew who to be using it until 5 weeks ago. That was the case, but now Pittman said there are at least 15 Mississippi journalists on Blue Sky as it becomes a preferred platform for reporters, writers, and activists and other groups who have been increasingly alienated by X. Why are they alienated by X? Look, it's not the rhetoric. As I've said, everybody gets it. We get it. The guy calling us Rhino Scum, it's like, well, that's it. I'm off Twitter. Somebody called me Rhino Scum, and I'm conservative scum. I'm not Rhino Scum. I'm conservative scum. And even if I was a rhino, if I was a Republican, I would be a rhino because I'm more conservative than the Republican Party. So it's like, that means nothing. Well, it got too angry. Look, I went on X and Twitter the other day, and when I saw the number of people that are, basically, well, come on. you're in the insurance business, you ought to be shot. You ought to be murdered. When you see that kind of stuff, yeah, you're like, wow, that's part of free speech, though. The nutbags are a part of free speech. But it's fine. But the Democrats are not getting off because of that. They're lying to you about that. Democrats aren't getting off because, well, there's too much hate. They're getting off it because they can't argue the issues. And as we get to the Christmas holiday, and then we start with the new year, we're going to be, it's going to be Democrats not discussing as much what went wrong in the election because they'll be too busy attacking the Trump administration for everything. But what you're going to find out is they haven't changed their opinion on anything. Democrats lost because they hold insane opinions on the issues. Democrats and liberals are going to blue sky because they believe and their opinions on issues are insane and totally out of the mainstream, and people call them on it. When you're out there advocating for the body mutilation of children, expect to get some hate mail. But all the Democrats are, well, we don't know what's going on. We can't figure it out. What does Jon Stewart think? Jon Stewart hasn't come up with his decision as to what went wrong in the election. Well, you're a bunch of idiots. That's why you lost the damn election, because you hold insane opinions on the issues to the point where you have to lie where you stand. Oh, the border is secure. The border is secure. The border is secure. You lied and got caught. You hold insane opinions. You believe in the weaponization of government. The opinions you hold with identity politics are racist, misogynist on the radical transgender movement, insane on the border, absolutely crazy on security of this nation. Oh, Trump stopped funding Iran. That's right. We blocked their oil money, so they can't fund the Islamic terrorist groups that are going after the United States and Western interest. Oh, he opened that back up. They have the money. They attack Israel. They attack hundreds of our military bases across the world. That's nuts. That's why you're losing. That's why you lost the last election. And so that's why they're going to blue sky. They're gutless. They can't argue with conservatives. That's why they're going. They want to sit in their own little bubble. Okay, I was going to say their own little, okay, not circular firing squad, but the other circle thing. And compliment each other for their insane opinions. That's why they went to blue sky. They're cowards. They cannot debate what they believe with the other side. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has a morning off. He has no voice. Hopefully mine stays for the whole 5 hours. Must be something going around. I know I sound all right, but my voice is actually worse than it sounds. And you're like, no, Gary, it sounds pretty bad. Okay, that's just normally, though. But we had we did the story yesterday about MSNBC and Rachel Maddow, and they're just furious at Morning Joe and Mika for going to Mar-a-Lago to talk to Trump. And they're feeling the heat. I mean, the ratings are down and everything else, and it's just like they're getting pounded. I mean, the circular firing squad is going on big time, even in the Democrat media. But here's part of Joe Scarborough yesterday. I just love this. Here we go.
You can do two things at the same time. You can say he had fascist rhetoric and still go in and talk to him.
Yeah.
You know why I do that? To get the read of the man. You know why I went in and talked to Macron? To get the read of the man at a crucial time in EU funding and NATO funding. You know why I went to leaders in the Middle East who were angry at the United States, and I sat there and I listened to them attacking me personally for 45 minutes because of U.S. policy? You know why I do that? To get the read of the leader, to get the read of where the country's going. So I can come back here and talk to you and let you know what the hell is going on.
Problem is, Joe, you got one problem. The Democratic Party and the liberals already have what they believe is the read on Trump. He's Hitler. There is no discussion. You already knew he was Hitler. You're not going to win that argument with liberals. He's Hitler. It's like, so you're going in to get the lay of the man who's Hitler? Well, you know what he's about. He's Hitler. You can hear the desperation and the anger. And the thing is, he's yelling at his audience. You stupid people, don't you realize what I'm doing here? You bunch of idiots, don't you realize? Oh, this is just great. It is so great to watch this thing, watch this thing blow up. But it's natural. This is expected to happen because, again, all liberals become victims. And that's what he's trying to tell you. He's a victim. He's right. Why don't you understand, stupid? Stop being the oppressor. We're victims here. We're Victim Joe and Victim Mika.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And I'm Gary McNamara. Eric is out. His voice isn't there. That's why. So it's me and you, 86690 Red Eye. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. This is really interesting because, when we always look at, in fact, my favorite thing to talk about is economics, to be honest with you. I like talking about that more than anything. Politics is okay, but economics is what I really love the most. How economics works, how politicians attempt to manipulate economics, how politicians try to sell you the thing that they can change economics, and they can't. They can manipulate economies, but you can't change economics because economics is how people respond to incentive. That's it. There's no other thing about economics. It's how people respond to incentive. You can say disincentive, but as we've said before, but it's how you respond to incentive. And if there is an incentive, you could view that as a disincentive. And there's always an impact. And I'm sure we'll get into the discussion of tariffs, down the road as we have before, because tariffs will have some type of economic impact. And what is it? We've talked about that before. We'll talk about it in the future. But this is on the minimum wage in California when they raised it to $20. And we said, okay, you'll probably lose business and you'll lose employees. You'll either lose business, which means fewer profits because prices will go up, as we saw they did. You'll have to lay off, or a combination of both. And we're sort of seeing a combination of both. But this is looking at employment from September of 23 until now. National Review had the story on it. California fast food restaurants shed thousands of jobs after $20 minimum wage hike. The California fast food industry shed more than 6,000 jobs after Democrat lawmakers passed a bill mandating a $20 minimum wage for most fast food and counter service restaurants in the state, according to new analysis of the labor data. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that between September of 23, when California Governor Gavin Newsome signed the bill, and June of 2024, California fast food employment dropped from 570,000, actually 571,000 if you look at it, to 564,000, a loss of almost 7,000 jobs in that period of time. And you might be like, yeah, but aren't they all laying off because of that'd be the next question. Okay, but aren't they all laying off because they're using more automation? That would be a logical question that you would ask. But if you look at and compare it to, what am I looking at here? Make sure I have this right. If you look at it from California alone, from September of 2022 to June of 2023, you had an increase in California of 17,000 jobs at fast food restaurants. From the period of September of 2023 to June of 2024, after the minimum wage was installed, you had a loss of 6,000 jobs. Now you compare it to the nation, California and the United States. From September of 2023 to June of 2024, California went from 571,000, I'm rounding it off, jobs to 564,000, a deficit of roughly between 6,500 and 7,000 jobs. The U.S., in that same time period, an increase in the increase in fast food jobs, 74,000. So in California, it went down 1.1%, nationwide, 1.6%. And, and that's why we're going to have the talk, whether it's a minimum wage or whether it's tariffs, because you have had some Republicans, not all, attempt to sell you that tariffs have no impact at all. Well, of course they do. Now, it all depends on where the tariffs are, where they're targeted, but they always do. J.D. Vance, during the campaign, was insistent that the steel tariffs, for example, didn't cause inflation. Well, of course they cause inflation, but it was minor inflation because they were targeted. But what you saw there was an increase in steel prices because, yeah, tariffs protect one industry, but they hurt the others that use that product. And that's what you found out. Wall Street Journal did a analysis of, again, through Bureau of Labor Statistics, and found there was significant job loss in those companies that use those steel products. You raise the cost of doing anything, and you're going to have an effect. And if you deny it, you're lying. Why? Because economics doesn't change. You can manipulate the economy. You can have government regulation that may be necessary. You look at putting tariffs on China, unfair trade practices, whatever. Yeah. But as we have said, understand there will be an impact that hurts America. You may be saying, yes, but we need to do this because you can make the case that having the military means we have less money in our pockets because we have to pay the taxes for it in order to protect the nation. And people are willing to do that in order to protect the nation. Our point is, don't lie. Republicans, don't lie. Don't sit there and say there is no effect when you increase the cost of something. Of course, there's an effect in some way. You can't change economics. Doesn't matter whether you have an R or a D in front of, the political party that you're a part of in Congress. That doesn't matter. Economics doesn't care. It's how people respond to incentive. End of story. And that's the thing that we've always, promoted on the on the show. But we'll see. Again, with tariffs, we have no idea where the president's going to go on it. But on minimum wage, as you can see here, it's something that Democrats used to argue all the time, that the minimum wage has no effect. Oh, it's so small. It's such a small. Well, yeah, the smaller the increase, the less impact that it has. Now, when you go from they go from $16 to $20, that had a much bigger impact because you're raising it significantly at that point. So you had, number one, I don't know. I'm sure the costs. We know that because it was shown after they increased it, fast food went up. And so when fast food goes up, you sell fewer things, which means you need fewer people. Just the reality of economics. That's all. So want to make sure we got that one there. So there it is in California. It always has an effect. So it's laughable when we played Gavin Newsome before out there talking about, we don't know yet. We don't know why we lost the election. And there he has on the podium the sign that says right there, attached right to the podium, lower prices, strong border. It's like, you don't know why they lost the election? Could you turn your podium around and look at it? Because it's right there. You know what it is. The other thing is, because I mentioned it before, and I got some response, people saying, but we have no idea. Why would he still go on? And this is the president going on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. And I'm like, well, he's not running for an election. Mix it up a little bit. We'll see whether he's not running for office anymore. And the one problem would be Welker is not going to talk about the things that she knows, Trump may have a strength on. It'll probably be everything. I bet you the vast majority would be on Hegseth. And it all depends on how you do it. This is interesting because Mark Halperin had Sean Spicer, who worked for Trump, on the show, and he's just like, I have no idea why Trump does this. It doesn't make any sense at all. I don't think it's as serious because he's not running for office. That's over. And if you want to mix it up, it all depends on, how you handle her questions. See, my point was it'd be like when J.D. Vance was on there and he would make her face would just tighten up. It was like, because he was so enraged. But here's a part of that discussion, which is really interesting because Sean Spicer just puts his head in his hands like, I have no idea why he does this. But his explanation is actually pretty good. Here we go.
Dan, why is Donald Trump going on Meet the Press?
I actually suspect that he may be potentially trying to kind of reestablish the enemy, for lack of a better word, heading, right now, this is about Republican on Republican. Are they going to confirm it? Like, there's very little talk about Democrats because they're largely irrelevant for him right now. And I think he's going on to mix it up. I think he's going to go on. He's going to go at her. He's going to turn around and say the media is against us and kind of try to get his side fired up heading into January.
Sean?
He lost a bet to Elon. I mean, this to me actually matters. Like, he used long form and independent media so effectively. These guys, week after week after week, if there's one Sunday show that sucks more than others, it's Meet the Press. And the idea that he's rewarding them, to me, is ridiculous. That's the one. I mean, if there's one criticism I have so far, that was it yesterday when they announced that. I get Dan's point mixing it up, but it's not a question. And I've had this discussion with the president before. It's not a question of can he handle it, can he do it. It's a question of prioritizing and rewarding people bad behavior. I mean, these guys they have continued, despite everything they got wrong in the election, to have roundtables every week that are devoid of anybody that speaks for the Trump side. They bash him, they criticize him, they fail to understand the basics of the election results. And yet the reward is, hey, we're going to give you the first interview. It's so disappointing.
Yeah.
And I agree with Sean Spicer from that point. You prioritize. But the fact is, if you want to get your message across, you won the election based on what? Independent media. Well, go to independent media to push what you're going to do. And in essence, isolate them. But I have no idea why Trump does this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just like you shake your head. And I agree with Sean Spicer that it's, if you want to, and I don't know, the other guy, I'm not sure, Dan something, I don't know who he is, who's on the Mark. This is the Mark Halperin podcast. I don't know who he is. But Sean, when he was talking, saying, well, he wants to mix it up and, take it somewhere else, and the media will focus on the fight back and forth. And Sean Spicer he's sit there right in front of the camera with his head in his hands going, no. And the point is, if I was an advisor to the president, I go, why are you doing this? You don't need to do it. There's no reason to do it. There's no sense of desperation that you have. Go on the independent media again. Go on Rogan again. Do an interview. Go out, use the independent media, use a media that you know is going to ask you the question on the issues that you're trying to promote. Because right now it's about, because everything, and they're right, though. They're right that right now it's Republican going after Republican. Oh, Joni Ernst, I mean, she's getting pounded on X. I mean, just pounded for everything that she has, believed before. And, the discussion out there, well, Lloyd Austin, I think Lloyd Austin only had 2 senators not vote for him for Secretary of Defense. And he has been absolutely horrendous. Just a horrendous head of the Department of Defense. And she voted for him, and so they're pounding on her for that. But right now it's Republican against Republican. Now, the only reason it doesn't matter as much is because Democrats are going against Democrats like crazy as to why they lost the election. And so it's not really having an impact, because the infighting on something like this is always going to happen in the transition period. And I think there's been more coverage on, Hunter Biden. Democrats can't figure out why they lost. But still, I agree with Sean Spicer. If you prioritize, why the hell are you going on with her? She is the worst. As he said, they suck the most. And it's like, you can push your agenda. You don't need her. Isolate them. Make them not relevant anymore. When you go on, you make them relevant. But these are the things that boggle people's minds with Trump. It's like, why is he doing it? There's no need to do it. Go on and push your agenda. You know how you won. You don't need these people. Don't reward them. 866-90-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off because he has no voice, which is a pretty good reason. I tell you this, I think they're going to catch the guy now that they got his face. The premeditated murder, as we all know, of the CEO. They're going to... Man, I'm looking at his face. They're going to be able to do it with the face technology that they have. They're going to get him.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric not in today because he's got no voice. So hopefully it returns for Sunday night, Monday morning. Talking about the president-elect, Trump going on Meet the Press, and I've been getting emails. I talked about it earlier and said, I don't really think it matters. I mean, would I choose it? No, I wouldn't. Then we just played Sean Spicer, who worked with Trump. He's just like, I have no idea why he's doing it. This makes no sense at all. He got his hands, his head in his hands, and said, it's why are you rewarding NBC? They're the worst of the worst, and she is. She is. Now he may be going on just to tick her off and watch her face get all stretched out and her tendons in her neck, become very, very pronounced. But is there a reason? I believe there's a reason for him to do it. No. But is it going to harm him much? No. But it's still, you still sit there and you shake your head. You go, why? We go to Dan in Chicago. Dan, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I think he's going on this show just to kind of have his voice heard by people who don't typically hear directly from him. Most people who listen to independent media, like you or me, a lot of your listeners, we know where Trump stands on the issues, what he's going to say, what he's going to think. But all the people who watch Meet the Press, they think that he actually said all Mexicans are murderers and rapists. He thinks that the bloodbath comment, they take that as like a threat for civil war because they get the spin on it. For him to actually go on there and talk directly to them, they're not going to have that chance to put a spin on anything because the viewers will hear exactly what he's saying.
Well, then why? Then here's my question to you: why, after he did the one was it the black journalist, after that interview, for months he did not do anything like Meet the Press. He didn't do any Sunday morning news shows. He went on none of the legacy media. Only J.D. Vance or one of his other surrogates did. Why did Donald Trump himself not do any of those shows? If he's fighting to win an election and he can reach an audience, why did he stop doing any of those type of shows in the months leading up to the election?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe he was worried about getting trapped with some sort of, the way they question things.
Because
things. I don't know.
Well, no, he put J.D. Vance or his surrogates in because he realizes they're much better at debating than he is, and he is not.
That's true.
And he is not good at because the problem is it's one of the reasons that and I've told the story a long time ago when I was a local talk show host in New York. I was interviewed by Ted Koppel. I can't remember the name of the show. The Ted Koppel show about an incident that happened. They interviewed me because I had a different opinion than all the other liberals in town. They interviewed me for 2.5 hours. They used me for 4 seconds and took me out of context. The problem is, as I've learned, and I won't do any interview unless I know it's live. I won't do any. I've said at that point, unless it's live with no editing whatsoever, we'll never do it. But still, the problem is they control the context of the question. And J.D. Vance and some of the other surrogates, J.D. Vance was able to deflect it. Trump isn't good at that. So that's why he didn't do it. He did it because he believed this is not an effective communicating place for me. And he won because he went on the traditional media where they asked the questions on the issues and where do you stand. They weren't, as Kristen Welker, unless she has changed, which she hasn't, will sit there and just focus on one thing and pound on it over and over again. And I guarantee it won't be on the things that won Donald Trump the election. Now, I don't think it's going to matter anymore because the election's over. But I agree with Spicer. I would tell him, don't do it. Because she controls, what you got to realize is when you go on a show, unless you're, and you've seen the editing that they did for Harris, for example, but they will, I don't know whether they're going to edit this one. I think he's going to do it beforehand, edit it, but they can edit it. Did he go in and say you can't edit anything of the show whatsoever? If not, they'll edit it. They'll selectively edit it. They'll use clips of it. And it's just not a good idea when the person who controls the narrative of because she asked the questions is a political activist who absolutely hates you. That's why I would say
right about the editing.
Yeah. Now I don't think it's going
to. If you were to go on there live, I think it would be a lot different story. They wouldn't be able to do any of that.
Yeah,
twist his words quite as much.
I just don't. He doesn't. Fact is, he doesn't need it. He can sell it. He can just sell it through the way that he did in the election, which was go on the other media. I saw that, for example, they're averaging about 2 million people, all right? 2 million. When he went on Joe Rogan, I think the last was like 65 million people watched it. And a lot of them were men, and that's what helped him win the election. If you're right now trying to win the narrative on all the issues, because remember, you only have a one right now, it's 217, 215 in the House because Gates is gone and two others are going to be in his administration. They have no room for error if he wants his agenda passed. So if you want your agenda passed, go on the media that won you the election and reach those people. So the pressure is on the members of Congress, especially on the Republican Party, that this is what the American public wants. Thanks so much for your call. And I understand what you're saying. And like I said, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. But when you're a lame duck president, which in essence he is, and you have a very, very, should I say, adventurous platform, you don't see in a normal second term where a president accomplishes a lot. And what this president wishes to do is unprecedented in American history. And so what you don't want is the screaming and yelling back and forth that you might have had in 2016 or even 2020 that didn't work for you. There's a reason Trump didn't do any of these interviews and J.D. Vance did. If you want to put J.D. Vance on, fine. You're not going to get probably the same audience. But like I said, I don't think it matters that much. But if you're prioritizing to reward the worst of the worst of the worst in the leftist radical political activists, doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. But then again, like I said, Trump always throws us curves. His labor secretary choice, somebody explain that one to me. And I know the surrogates are afraid to touch it. You don't see anybody out there promoting her like they're promoting Hegseth. Or you don't see them really criticizing her as they should. There are some conservatives, we've criticized the daylights out of her. I'm sorry, that pick from Trump is absolutely nuts. On the one hand, you've got the Department of Government Efficiency, which they say we've got to reduce the number of people in the federal government, and that's key. I mean, they talked yesterday. You're not going to show up for work? You're gone. Well, who does he put in labor secretary? A woman who believes that all government jobs should be unionized. So that kind of stuff can't happen. It makes no sense. And so, those are the things where you go, okay, but it is Trump. It is Trump. Some things he does just sometimes makes no sense and baffles us all. But as I said before, I don't agree with 100% of anybody. And most Republican presidents, if you look at Bush, maybe 50, 60%. And that's really, the judgment over the last, few years, because you've had mostly Democrat presidents. Bush did things that really just ticked us off completely. And Trump has done fewer of those things. I agree more with Trump than I do. I agree with Trump more than the average Republican politician, which is I said more when the guy called us Rhino Scum yesterday, and we said, no, we're conservative scum. We're scum, but we're conservative scum. And it's like, but if I was a Republican, which I'm not, I'm an independent, but I get in Texas to vote in one primary, and I've always voted in the Republican primary. But if I was a Republican, I would be a Rhino because I'm more conservative than they are. And that's our concern. Our concern with Trump is not that he's going to become too conservative. In fact, we wish him luck with the Department of Government Efficiency. But if you really want the Department of Government Efficiency, why in the hell would you ever pick a labor secretary who wants to unionize every level of government, federal, state, and local? And, of course, not one Trump absolutist can defend that. You can't, and I mean the people that are just, because it happens. I mean, you see it on social media. Trump can do no wrong. It's like the woman that called us up one time and said, Trump has never lied about anything ever. It's like, wow, okay. So You know, on some things he balances himself. Putting Bhattacharya in there for the National Institutes of Health, good. He's a guy who follows science. He's a doctor. Putting RFK Jr. in the position of being the head over Medicare and Medicaid, absolutely nutballish. But the two may cancel each other out. I don't know. But I'm not one of those. And you don't see a lot of people supporting RFK Jr. on the right. You know, you do see some. He's going to make us healthy. Government's going to put in the rules and regulations to make us healthy. Yeah. And RFK's the guy to do it. No. He's a lifelong liberal. So, again, like I said, don't agree all the time with everybody, but agree more with Trump. And we'll see where it goes. But no, I would say, I would suggest that he not do it. But he's going to do it. I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem. But if you're trying to push your narrative, which is very adventurous, I've never seen a president in the first term try to do what this president's going to try to do in a lame duck session. Never. And I wish him the best of luck because most of what he wants to do is wonderful. But you need to make sure that you market it correctly. And Meet the Press is not the place where she's going to allow you to do that. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. Compliance, Safety, Accountability, or CSA, is the FMCSA Safety, Compliance, and Enforcement Program. Its goal is to hold motor carriers and drivers accountable for highway safety and to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on our roads. CSA does this by assessing the safety performance of motor carriers and drivers based on data collected during roadside inspections, crash reports, and FMCSA investigations. Based on the data that is compiled, motor carriers are assigned a score. The carrier is then grouped with other carriers who have had a similar number of safety events. Carrier scores within the group are then ranked to determine intervention priority. Low scores are better, so carriers with the highest scores are those that are most likely to be targeted for intervention by the FMCSA. Interventions range in severity and may include warning letters, roadside, off-site, or on-site inspections, civil penalties, or operation out-of-service orders. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley. He has no voice. He's not here. I'm Gary McNamara. I'm here. Let's go to John in Knoxville, Tennessee. John, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What's up?
Yes, sir. I just want to make a comment. Love the show. Love what's going on there. I get an opportunity to listen 2 hours every morning.
Cool, thanks.
But I want to say a couple of things about Trump's cabinet picks. I guess the first thing is we're not privy of the conversations that have taken place behind closed doors. So I'm sure he's, doing his best to pick the people that will carry out his agenda, which is tremendous. And the second thing is I know that there are people that used to be anti-Trumpers that are strongly on his side, and I think case in point will be J.D. Vance. He's obviously believed the lies, but now he's a tremendous fake, as we have seen. So I know it's easy to look at their past history and what they represented and what they chose, but I also think that we got to give Trump a chance. And
well, here's where I stand, and it goes back directly to what Trump has said himself. This is the problem. In 2016, I know I sat here where everybody said Trump is a business person. He will hire all the right people. When Trump hired all the people, he said, these are the right people. I know how to hire. After he was done, in fact, just was about a month and a half ago, He said, I hired so many of the wrong people when in 2016. So he admits himself he hired the wrong people. If you're going to have for example, J.D. Vance believed the lies and he could explain it. He said, look, I believe this and it was wrong. This didn't happen. And he was right. It was accurate. These are issue things that we're concerned with. These are people that have the labor secretary as far left away from Trump as possible. Now, maybe they did have the talks behind the scene. I don't believe adults, especially if you're an adult that's a far left liberal, that you ever truly change what your opinions are. The majority don't when you get to a certain age. You don't get to be in your, maybe if you're in your 20s or 30s, you do. In your 50s or 60s, you don't. You don't need anybody getting in the way, and you don't need to be marketing anyone who has diametrically opposed opinions to the Department of Government Efficiency. And that's my only point. It doesn't make any sense. She could be okay, but it doesn't make sense why he picked her, because he could have picked many other people that could do the same job that does not have far left labor opinions. That would be all. Remember, the whole focus yesterday, the entire focus yesterday in the Senate, the entire focus was on efficiency of employees of the government. The whole discussion yesterday, the vast majority of it, and here you've got the labor secretary who believes you should unionize every single level of government, which would stop that from happening. So that's my point. It just doesn't make, they may have had the discussions. It doesn't look good. You didn't need to do it. It's sort of like Meet the Press. I don't think it's going to affect him, but you don't need to do those things. Why are you doing things that can blow up when you don't have to do it? It would be my point. And I think we're both looking at the same thing. We want him to be successful. And he has admitted that he made major mistakes in the people that he hired after that was a strong point when he ran. So I'm going by what he said. He said, I don't want to make those same mistakes again. I'll pick the right people this time. Well, when you pick Bobby Kennedy Jr. and when you pick the labor secretary that he picked in there that have major differences with him, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And that have far left liberal opinions. But I appreciate your call. I know we're after the same thing, and I just, he's the one that really said, let's not hope, let's do the right thing. And he admitted, I picked wrong people in my first administration. I won't do it again. And you just go, doesn't make any sense. Explain it to me. And he doesn't give the explanation that you just gave right there, where you said, maybe he had back, he had, behind the doors. He didn't come out and say, look, I know she's had different opinions, but we've settled them all. She agrees with me. No unions, no this. He hasn't done that.
Links to everything Red Eye on the website redeyeradioshow.com.
And I'm Gary McNamara. He's Eric Harley, but he has no voice, so he's not here tonight. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. To the last caller, to the last two callers. Look, I understand, but I more agree with Sean Spicer that he shouldn't. There's no reason for him to go on Meet the Press. It doesn't do it. There's no advantage to doing it if you're trying to, push the whole narrative thing. And again, when I talked about the labor secretary, and like, why in the world? And still, Robert Kennedy Jr. completely against that pick. You don't need far left liberals that are over massive programs that you believe have to be more efficient and cut out waste. And if you're trying to, in the Department of, remember, everything that I saw yesterday on that meeting with the Senate was, so much of it was about, we have too many government employees. And then your labor secretary is somebody who believes that and pushed the bill to have unions in every level of government. You know, when you look at the history of unions, we bring this up every time because it's important to know. When you look at, for example, the 30s or 40s or 50s, you look at Roosevelt, you look at George Meany, for example, the huge labor leader way back then, completely against unions in the government. Why? Government doesn't make a profit. Unions exist. This is why unions didn't come out to get more money from government. Unions existed to share the profits. They wanted more of the profits from private companies. That's it. So unions were anti-government unions. Just so you can understand how radical the position of that labor secretary is. And there's just no reason for it. And so I understand what you're saying. Maybe they had, behind the scenes, they had a discussion on it. Well, then he should say that. When you pick somebody who was so diametrically opposed to one of the major things that you're trying to do, which is government efficiency, which is reduce the federal workforce, it just doesn't make any sense. And I go back to what he has said. And the strong point in 2016 for Trump was he's a business person. He will hire all the right people. It was either in the last month or month and a half where he came out and said, I hired all the wrong people. I hired so many wrong people. And so when he says that, you look and you go, why? You don't need to do this. Now, might it not make a difference? It might not make a difference. But why do it? There are other people that are as qualified that you can promote that have your agenda and have always had your agenda. And he's picked some great people. I would rather have Hegseth as head of the Department of Defense than DeSantis. I think DeSantis just in general for the future after Trump, for the strong leaders of the Republican Party, I view him, J.D. Vance, Byron Donalds, and others, I view them as a strength, and I think he can market himself better. This is more politics than could he do the job. But Hegseth won me over when he simply said, there's only two things that matter in the military: being lethal and meritocracy. He's absolutely right. I went, okay, that's what you want. And you're going to need to bring in people, how should I say this, that are a little bit different because they're going to have to do different things. They're going to have to do things that are earth-shaking because Trump, in technically a lame duck session, is going to try to do more than any president in modern times to change the direction of where the government is going. So you're going to need people that are different. And so he's picked some really, really strong choices. And like I said, we'll see, but I think we're all after the same thing. What will work? What will reduce the power of the federal government? What will reduce the weaponization of the federal government? Because we now know from Biden, we now know what they're about. And the talk and the support of so many liberals for the blanket pardon of people in the administration is because they wish, they believe they have found a loophole. We talk about one of the loopholes that was found in the government when it comes to taxation without representation. They found it. Borrow a hell of a lot of money for what we want today and put it on future generations. They're not represented. They're not alive. And that's one of the most immoral things we're doing in this country right now that isn't talked about. And it is immoral what we're doing. For what we want today, we're putting it on future generations and then justifying it. And so, you look at the loophole that the Democrats are attempting to completely and totally exploit, which is because the message will be sent. It's already been sent with Hunter Biden, but it will be sent completely if Democrats get what they want, which is, all right, blanket pardons across the board. Then you've just normalized the fact that we can go in, we can weaponize the government, we can become a banana republic because the president at the end of his term can pardon anybody he wants for federal crimes. Just make sure you commit federal crimes. Weaponize from the federal level, and basically we'll give you immunity from prosecution. Now we found another loophole. We can have a corrupt government, and then we'll put a person in there who's even more corrupt, who's protecting his corruption and other people's corruption. All right. She reappeared again. Kamala Harris reemerges. Saw this. Brings a new accent. But what I saw is when she made an appearance yesterday, first thing I looked at was the lighting. Because the video, pre-Thanksgiving video that she put out? It's like, and if you know the episode of Seinfeld I'm talking about, it's the two-faced episode where the woman looks, very attractive in good lighting and yikes in bad lighting. And so she's dating Jerry, and Jerry will only bring her to the coffee shop, Seinfeld, the coffee shop, because the lighting's proper there. So that's when I saw that video, it's like the camera angles made it so her face had all of these shadows. And I think that was the part that made her look horrible. It made her look exhausted. Other people believe drunk. It made her look really bad. So the first thing I was looking at was the lighting, and you can see the lighting. You can see her entire face is lit up. There really aren't. There's one tiny shadow I'm looking at here, but for the most part, it's all lit up. But let's see what she had to say, because I think I have found, after you listen to this, I think I found where she can go in January, what she can work as. Here we go.
I knew y'all were in town. I couldn't let it go without coming by to say hello and to say thank you to everyone here, all of these extraordinary leaders. I wanted to come by and say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, whatever you may celebrate. But most important, let's make sure we celebrate each other.
Now, I thought for a moment, was she slurring her words? Look, it was only a glass of wine or two, all right? But when she said more importantly, let me get to the last part of it here. Let me do this again here. Here we go.
Most important, let's make sure we celebrate each other.
I thought to myself, wow, she could do one of those cosmetics infomercials where they sell cosmetics. And, oh, you look so, it's just, let's celebrate each other. Oh, look at this. Oh, this works great on your neck. Let's do this here. Oh, let's put on this. Oh, a little bit of rouge here. Oh, you look so wonderful. You ever see how ridiculous those infomercials are for cosmetics? She could be one of the hosts for a cosmetic infomercial. Hey, I'm always trying to help people. She's going to be unemployed soon. I'm trying to help. That's all I'm trying to do is help. Because I care. Golly, she's... Everything in that video is why she lost. Every single thing in that video is why she lost. It's just every time she talks, it's the most cringeworthy thing, which is why I don't really watch cosmetic infomercials. So, would Biden pardon her? I mean, I don't know what for, but I mean, would Biden pardon her? It's really going to be interesting because it's media generated. I mean, who's on that? I want to see who's fully on the pardon list. I still think the left would be furious if he pardoned Liz Cheney. because you've got a ton of Democrats that believe she's one of the major reasons that Harris lost was because Harris got her endorsement and then Dick Cheney's endorsement. And liberals were pulling their hair out going, why does she think that's a good thing? We're insane Democrats. We hate the Cheneys. But when you see the names out there, Fauci and Cheney, for example, and you're like, how many are they going to put on the list? Because what if it ends up being like 100 people with blanket pardons for crimes not even charged with? If you haven't heard it, I'll have it. We did it early in the show. I'll have it for you coming up following the top of the hour. The polling on whether Americans are happy or are in favor of of Biden pardoning his son. And I think that's why you saw some of the pullback yesterday. You saw it on social media a lot saying, maybe it isn't such a good idea to put out a blanket pardon for everyone. And I think part of that is based on the polling for the Hunter Biden pardon, and it's not good. But when you look at it, if Biden does this, you basically have the American public and a ton of independents saying he is protecting corruption across the board. And so you have a Democrat Party that cannot win on any major issue and now is viewed as by the American public as corrupt. And that's what you were getting, that if Biden does a blanket pardon, that he really hurts the Democrat Party in the future. He doesn't help, he hurts. And then there was some debating going on. Well, maybe he should give the pardon, and they all refused, and everything would be all right. And I'm like, oh, my God. The Democrats. Is that what would save the Democrats? Biden has pardoned 100 Democrats. They all refuse his pardon. They don't want to be associated with him in any way. They'd rather have Trump. I can see that. My sources say they'd rather have Trump come after them than get a Biden pardon. 866, it's all insane, folks. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has no voice, so he didn't come in today. We hope he's okay. He said hopefully by Sunday. The funniest thing is, I only got a text message. Alan talked to him, and Alan said he just sounded horrible, but it was just so funny because I was coming in. I was just pulling into work when I got his text, and so I had to listen to the automated woman in my entertainment center. and she said to me, verbatim from Eric's text, I can't come in, but I don't have COVID. I checked. So I'm like, wow, I just flashed back. Because he had COVID. He's had COVID a couple times, really, really bad. He had it in the last year, I think, once again, where we got hit by it really, really bad. You know that in all this time, I know I've had COVID because from everywhere I've read, it's spread. Everybody has been exposed to it in the world. Well, in modern civilization, maybe there's somebody who lives on a deserted island who hasn't been. But I've never tested positive. Uh-oh. Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.